potential home buyer can now learn everything and just about anything about your house in a few clicks on the internet. So how can sellers stay ahead and attract these net-savvy buyers? Here with how you do that, Brendon DeSimone. He is the author of Next Generation Real Estate. All right, what is next gen? What does that mean? I feel like everybody's smart about the web these days.
You know, next generation is anybody. It's not about your age, what year you're born. It's anybody with access to information on the web, on apps, doing lots of search, access to tons of information.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I think a lot of people who sell their homes, they don't think about what might be on the web about their house that they're not aware of. Where do you go first? Do you just do a simple Google search on your address?
I tell sellers it's a buyer beware, it's seller beware now. You do a Google search the address, see what comes up. Look at police blotters, see old listings, find all kinds of information. The seller may have put their address online for some other thing that you can find out more information about them.
You know, there was an interesting little anecdote in your story where you said something like, you know, a seller had had a bike stolen out of his garage, and then people thought that maybe it wasn't a safe neighborhood. So things could be misconstrued and misunderstood.
Exactly. There was one example of a guy who simply had his bike stolen 5 years earlier. It was stupid. He left the garage door open. It was his fault. A buyer sees that and thinks it's not a safe neighborhood. There was another story in San Francisco. I had a client who had bars in the windows, and we took them off and planted nice planters when we went in the market. Well, a buyer did Google Street View and saw the bars in the windows from 6 months earlier and thought it wasn't safe.
You need to look at the Google Street View. That's for darn sure.
It's amazing what you can see going up and down a block on Google Street View.
And, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of house you have. It can look like hell on Google Street View.
Yeah, and your neighbor's houses could look hell, too. Look at Google Earth. Look in the backyard. There's so much information out there. You kind of got to stay one step ahead of these buyers.
You say look at the local building or planning department's website. What will I find there?
Find out building permits, if they were signed off, if they weren't signed off, whether it's a legal single-family home, whether they have a certificate of occupancy. If you buy the home without these things and there's a mistake, you're on the hook with the town down the road.
You say look at your listing and sales history. What am I going to find there? You
know, if you had your house in the market 2 years ago at a crazy price, it didn't sell, buyers will see that. They'll wonder what your story is. They're going to think there's something wrong with your house.
You know, I worry about the kinds of information that people might find in places that I may never think of looking. Are there other places that people might go?
There's a place in New York now called addressreport.com. People can go on there and they can look up anything about that properties, construction information, whether there's rodents, how many trees in the street. It's things like rodents,
rats,
about the schools.
Which, believe me, there are a few of those in New York City. You can't get away from them.
There's so much out there.
So here's the thing, though. When you are putting your house up for sale and you've got to have this great listing that's really eye-popping online, do you hire a professional photographer? Do you hire a stager? What's your advice?
Of course. You have to hire an agent who's going to pay for a top-shelf photographer. Full-blown. The open house is no longer your first impression. It's those photos going online. You've got to have great photos. If you're not ready to sell your house, you're not going to have great photos. Don't put it in the market, because once it goes in the market, the days on market starts ticking.
It's totally true. And that really matters, because once it's an old listing, people figure, oh, everybody's seen it. It's not good.
It's a stale listing. Something's wrong with it. If your photos aren't great, that's a buyer's first impression. They're going to move on to the next home, especially when we start seeing more inventory.
Brendon, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. All right.